Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learn Your Ballot educational series, where you get the 411 on what and who is on the ballot. So happy and grateful to be here. I'm Precious Azure, accompanied by the amazing Dave Lewis, and we're just going to break it down for y'all today.
All right, welcome back, good people. Appreciate y'all joining us. Again, we're excited about this opportunity. As we all are becoming more informed and empowered before we make it out to the polls. Again, everybody's talking about the presidential election, which I'm quite frankly sick of.
I'm over it, okay?
But it is important. But we also want to build some awareness and explain the importance of the local level candidates and the power of voting from a state level to a county level to a city level, and understand how these elected officials affect us day to day, as it's super important to understand who we're putting in these seats and these roles. And so we've done some research. Again, we're nonpartisan, so our perspective and our hope is that people make informed decisions and not just based on the information that we're giving you guys, but encourage you to do your own research and make your vote really count.
And we are guilty of being blind at the polls and just voting whoever name we like. We've all done it, but it's so important for us to be more informed on who we're actually voting for, because that's what makes our vote count. So today we are going to break down the Justice of the Peace, the Harris County Sheriff, but breaking down what the sheriff's role entails as a whole, even if you're not a part of Harris County, the tax assessor, as well as the county clerk. So these are some of the positions that we probably don't talk about a lot, but want to go ahead and let you know what they do, how they impact you, and who's on the ballot. So let's get started with Justice of the Peace. Dave, go ahead and get started with that one. What do they do exactly?
Right, and I'm sure most people are familiar with the Justice of the Peace. This is typically, especially in smaller towns and smaller cases that are non-criminal, that are non-jailable offenses. Typically, people will go before the Justice of the Peace. And basically, they preside over the justice courts in cases that involve misdemeanors, civil disputes, landlord tenants. That's an important one right now. If you guys look across the country, all these cases are showing up in these courts, and most of them are the Justice of the Peace courts with evictions. Like, evictions is a huge thing right now. Harris County, Houston, is leading the nation in evictions right now. I think at one point I'm sure we're close to 12,000 right now. I knew at one point we were at 10,000. I know with the CDC moratorium on evictions, that has slowed it down, but it hasn't completely stopped it, because I know people are still being evicted on that. So those seats are super important. And if you guys see the dispute and the constant back and forth between what the federal mandates have been and then on a local level, to see how in most courts they're not enforcing these and they're not supporting the federal mandates that are being in place. So these roles are important when these are being discussed and when you sit on the ballot. Some of the things that you guys will probably end up in front of the Justice of the Peace for, again, are traffic fines, Class C misdemeanors, civil cases that are below 20,000, truancy cases. So if a child's skipping school too much, they're criminalizing kids for everything. Marriage, this is where you will officially get your marriage license and certificate. So yeah, those are some of the things you'll see with that.
Do we have someone to vote for?
On this ballot, it's the person is it's non-contested, the role, the Justice of the Peace role, and I can tell you who that is. A couple of them are non-contested, depending on what district you're in and what your jurisdiction is. But there are 8 that are on the ballot this year. And so there's, out of the 8, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that are non-contested. So you'll probably only see, you may or may not see someone on your ballot from these districts, depending on. So the districts that'll be on the ballot is, precincts. So there's precinct 1, will be on the ballot. That's Eric Carter, who's an incumbent Democrat, and then there's Jerry Dugas, which is a Republican for Precinct 1. And okay, so there's several that are uncontested. So you have Precinct 2 is uncontested, Precinct 3 is uncontested, Precinct 4 is uncontested, Precinct
So
6 and
uncontested because
7.
nobody running against them.
Yeah, so there's only two precincts. So Precinct 1 and Precinct 5 will be on the ballot. So if
Okay.
those are the precincts, you will see your candidate on there. For Precinct 1 is Eric Carter. He's an incumbent Democrat. He's running against Jerry Dugas. And
Okay.
Precinct 5 is Israel Garcia. He's a Democrat, and he's running against incumbent Russ Rigway. So
Okay.
if you're in
So guys, yeah, it's important to download Ballotpedia so you can see who's on your specific ballot, because it is based on your zip code and what county you're in. So definitely just take in this information to learn exactly what they do and what they're responsible for. And that way you know what lens to look at them when you're doing your due diligence and researching their background. But okay, great. So we'll move on to the county sheriff. So this is county level law enforcement, as stated. They are responsible for serving warrants. They also operate the jails, the county jails, and seize property. So why did I just think about all of those shows where you have people like getting towed, like getting their car towed or getting like their properties, I mean, I guess they're included in these evictions too. Is that part of the whole seizing property as well? Would that fall under that category?
Absolutely. So anytime if you're getting the courts, if there someone's filing an eviction notice, it has to go through the courts, which typically ends up the justice of the peace has approved this, and then it's typically a sheriff that will issue this, and sometimes a constable, but typically it's a sheriff that will provide the notice to the tenant to
Okay.
vacate the premises on this as well. And then
And then from a jail perspective, they're also the person that determines how long you're in there. They have the power to release you or keep you, right?
well, what they do is they manage the county jails. Like that's their
Okay.
role, and they also provide the bailiffs for the courts. So you'll see a sheriff that if you're in a county jail, typically there's sheriffs that are running that. Like they assign and they hire the bailiffs for the courts.
Oh, okay. So they're in charge of staff. Just, I guess the quality of your experience in jail is ran by the sheriff.
Absolutely, especially on the county level.
Interesting. Didn't know that they were, overstaffed and all of that. They can hire or fire those people.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, and then that's a good thing to know too, because when you talk about leadership, everything starts at the top down. So, based on the character of that sheriff, will then determine what type of staff that he's going to have then servicing those of us that get in that unfortunate situation.
Right.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, we're moseying on down to the tax assessor. Woo! Get excited when you talk about taxes, right?
Yeah.
Not so much.
And before we
Not
get
so
there, Precious, I just want to point out on there for Harris County, the incumbent is Ed Gonzalez, and he is um, running against or being contested by Republican Joe Dana. So you can look these two candidates up on Ballotpedia. As we mentioned earlier, it's important. Um, Ed Gonzalez has, if you guys look at some of the things he's done around criminal justice reform and led the way in bail reform for Harris County, he's also supported cite and release program. So we just adopted cite and release program for misdemeanors in Houston, but Harris County has had a cite and release program, I think, since um, earlier this year. They adopted a cite and release program. So just think about the kind of person that you want in that role and understand the kind of power they have. Like the fact that Harris County is one of the first counties in the country to adopt cite and release programs for low-level, nonviolent misdemeanors is huge. So just think about that when you guys are voting, when you guys want to just kind of decide who you want to represent you. as well.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that even knowing the difference between, like, does the chief of police and the county sheriff work together at all? Because what's the difference between getting pulled over by HPD versus a sheriff?
So
Does sheriff even focus on? I guess they wouldn't focus on like traffic and all of that.
well, it depends. Like it depends on if you live in Houston or if you're outside of Houston. There's all these different districts. There's these different agencies because there's different police agencies. There's Houston Police, HPD, but then you also have Fort Bend. You have Missouri. So you have all these, but there's also Harris County. So within Harris County, there's these different agencies in these different cities that have their own law enforcement. So Harris County is pretty much the sheriffs are over Harris County, and they sometimes if you're on the highway, you may get pulled over by the highway patrol, or depending on where you are in the city or in Harris County, you may get pulled over by a sheriff. So it's kind of it depends on where you are, but they're typically not patrolling. That's not their job to patrol like that. They're not patrolling and patrol officers looking for people that are speeding and stuff. But they're usually serving warrants. They're over the jails. They're handling issues that are around property. They're in the courts. So that's their role.
Gotcha.
But they should work together. I mean, I think depending on the relationships and stuff like that, but there should be an overlap in all these.
Right.
Like they are considered police officers. So the police, the constable, the sheriff, their role, they're all hired as peace officers. That is what their role says. That's their title.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay, so I mean, a tax assessor is pretty self-explanatory, but is there anything specific we should highlight about the tax assessors? Because I know they're basically over like property taxes, right?
That car title and registration, that's really their whole thing. They determine like the property value, like what our property is worth. Um, and
That's pretty big.
yeah, so it kind of determines like what the property within the county, like what your property value is in the county.
So I also heard about them wanting to increase property taxes due to COVID. So they were a part of making that decision.
Yes. So that's and not necessarily making the decision because that decision comes from the commissioner. Like think about we had a conversation about the commissioner. The commissioner sets the taxes for the county.
Right.
And that's what they're and it's that the commissioner sets the Harris tax assessors, they assess the property to make sure whatever the value of it is. And then from there, they calculate your property taxes based on the percentage that the commissioner's court has set. I think right now property taxes are 2%, 2 point something percent. And so what the tax assessor does is they assess how much each property is worth. And from there, they set your tax amount based on the city's percentage.
Gotcha. So I think on the ballot for the tax assessor, we have Chris Daniel, who's a Republican, and Harris Bennett, who's a Democrat, and Billy Pierce, who's a Libertarian. Now, I don't know which one of these are an incumbent or all these people running for the first time.
So Ann Harris Bennett is the incumbent.
Okay.
And you have Chris Daniel and Billy Pierce both contesting her seat. They're running against her.
Okay. And the other cool thing about Ballotpedia is that you're able to, they have a lot of data on there in regards to like the primary elections. So it's good to know how the votes are running to see like where the vote is leaning, right? So I'm gonna look up Chris Daniel real quick to see where we are with the tax assessor. So for the primary elections, he got 100% of the Republican vote, but there were only 155,000 votes total on the Republican side. and Ann Harris, she won against her other running mates, but there were a total of 270,000 Democrats that voted for the tax assessor. So looks like Ann Harris, with her being the incumbent, she's also in the lead from the primary. So I guess we'll see how it all pans out.
Yep.
For sure. Okay, cool. So lastly, we have the county clerk. Now, if you are a business owner or aspiring, you've been to the county clerk's office to get you a DBA, just to be like, let me get this so I can start my business. So I'm familiar with the county clerk.
Right.
So what other reasons would we go to the county clerk's office?
So this very reason that we're having this Learn Your Ballot is they manage the elections. So the county clerk's job, if you have a really good county clerk, they ensure that you have enough polls in the different districts for people to get to. They make sure they're accessible. Their job is to make sure that you have every opportunity possible to exercise your civil liberty, which is voting. And if you notice now, like there was, I think just yesterday, there was a article in the paper, I think it was Houston Chronicle, that talked about Harris County, since the Supreme Court shot down the idea of having 11 drop-off places and then reduce it to one. So the response to that is what Harris County is doing, and what we now have Chris Hollins, who's in place. He took Ann Bennett's place. Right now, he's an interim. So what he's doing is he's allocating $27 million to increase the number of polling locations within the city. And I know in one of the places now is downtown. They're going to use the Rockets arena where the Rockets play as a Toyota Center as a polling place for sure. And they're going to have 7 or 8 different locations that will be 24-hour polling locations as well. So those things are the role of the county clerk. And that's why it's important to ensure that you have the right person in that seat that understands the importance of people being able to vote and being able to have access to voting. It shouldn't be a hassle. But so having the right person in that place is huge. They also issue marriage license, bonds. They're responsible for property deeds, your birth and death certificates, the whole nine, when it comes to those types of things.
Okay, so we have on the ballot now for Stan Stannard. That's it, Stan Stannard. Okay, Stan Stannard. He's a Republican. And then we have Tanisha Hudspeth, who's a Democrat. And it says here that they have an unexpired term. So the county clerk, I've never seen that before. So that's cool to know.
Yep. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's as much information as we can give and keep it as simple as possible around those positions.
Yeah, agreed. And if you've been, tuning in for this series, it's a lot of information to take in. So we're doing our best to be, relatable and bring our experiences to you and really break down what all of this means, so that, you are more competent when you are, casting those votes. And definitely feel inclined to reach out to these people. They're serving the community. And so if you have any specific questions or matters, you should be able to, address their office or them directly as well. We really have to start, even beyond the vote, start really exercising our voice once we have these people in the roles and holding them accountable. That's the other big piece to this.
Right.
So definitely excited to get this information out. This is definitely something that we need to pass down to our kids, even just young teenagers that's about to grow up and be able to have that right to vote, them knowing how much this affects them and making sure that, like, hey, it matters. So, like, that should be celebrated, their first time being at the polls, So I'm really excited. I have some younger siblings that are now hitting that 18-year benchmark. And so I'm pushing them pushing them to the polls as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to echo what Precious says, that we hope that you guys, when you guys watch this series, that you feel empowered, you feel educated, and you took something away from it that will encourage you to think about the local elections more, and think about the people that are running on a local level. Even though they're not getting all the limelight and attention, we do live in this social media world where all these positions, they elevate on purpose, and don't really have you focus a lot on the local level. Like, there's not a lot of conversation around that, which I think our systems continue to do us a disservice by not focusing on these people that are running on a local level. But again, it's about money and ratings. But you got to think about your life, think about your kids, think about your schools, and what affects you mostly. And it's local things that affect us mostly. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for your ear, for listening. Thank you, Precious, for all your hard work and your data that you provided to this episode. Again, we're with Community Action Collective. You can find us on Facebook at Community Action Collective, and our handles on Facebook and Twitter are both CAC Houston. And we hope you guys follow us. You guys can join us, reach out to us via email. We're cachhouston@yahoo.com if you guys want to reach us. Any last words, Precious?
No, I appreciate you. We completed this. We said we were going to do it, and here we are at the finish line. So now I'm just excited for all this information to get out. Just thankful that we were able to be consistent and really see this through. This is our first time even doing this, and so I just feel overwhelmed with joy that we actually did it. You know, there's so many times where we want to do certain things, but you make time for the things that are important. And so this was very, very important to us and wanting to get this word out. So I'm grateful.
Absolutely. And that's a wrap, people. We appreciate you. Get to the polls, go vote, and exercise your power.
Awesome. Have a good night, guys.